Welcome to Policy on Demand. I'm Sindhu Blume. Mexico elected its first female president yesterday, Claudia Sheinbaum. And here to talk about what her administration could mean for Mexico's economy and trading partners, the largest one being the United States, is Craig Stronberg with PwC Intelligence. Craig, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
So before we get into what this could mean for a variety of factors and issues, are companies talking to you and asking you about these global elections, major global elections that are happening this year?
Yeah, I mean, it is usually, I would say, in the last 6-8 months, question number one. You know, part of that is because there was an enormous amount of elections this year. There's 50 plus, including in the United States. But the other is that in the macroeconomic environment in which we are in, where volatility is a top concern for businesses, these elections have a direct impact on those forces going to get easier or harder to deal with. And so they want to know as far ahead of time what to expect.
So I want to start with talking about what is happening in Mexico. Is there a transformation taking place?
So I think it's too early, right, to ask the president-elect to see if there's going to be a transformation taking place. Like all due credit to her for election. I think Mexico in many ways is kind of a remarkable place. I think the thing that we in businesses have to remember is that she is inheriting an enormous series of challenges, right, from her predecessor. And she's very capable. We've seen that she's very capable. But from a social, from a justice, from an investment, from an infrastructure, from a legal, from a law enforcement point of view, there are a lot of things that she needs to get done. And I think the order in which she does that and the vigor with which she does that is going to tell businesses a lot about the investment atmosphere in Mexico.
All right, tell us what this election and what Claudia Sheinbaum means for Mexico's economy.
So, right, Mexico should be having, and somewhat is having, a moment, right, because of U.S.-China tensions, which we've talked about extensively on the show. Some companies are looking for alternatives, and that includes Chinese companies, right? Even just in this calendar year, 42 brand new Chinese manufacturing locations have opened up in China, right? So it's not just nearshoring for Canada and the US, it's globally, a lot of people are looking at Mexico with massive talent pools like the US, right? It's bicoastal, it's got Pacific and Atlantic access. It's got decent infrastructure, needs improvement, right? It's got a big labor pool. But part of the problem is more is going to have to be done at the federal level to keep all of this going, right? One of those things is massive infrastructure investment. Another is much more clear regulations and regulatory policy so that foreign direct investment that has been very encouraging can keep to come in.
All right, and what about Mexico's relationships with its trading partners and specifically also its role in the world? And what do you know about her interactions with global leaders?
So I'm really curious to see what she's going to do. If I had to guess, and it is a guess, right, I think she's going to be far more active in foreign policy than her predecessor was, in part because he was not particularly active, right? He chose to stay at home. He forego opportunities to be at the G20. And I think many people forget that Mexico is even a member of the G20 because he doesn't ever present himself. He never really went to the UN General Assemblies. So there's a huge component of Mexico's presence, which is tied to its economy, which is its foreign policy, that she has the opportunity to completely reshape. So I would assume she's going to come to Washington very soon after, elections, probably go to Ottawa as well. I would expect that Beijing is probably third on that list, right? So I think if we see her head west from her point of view, right, go across the Pacific, I think that's probably a pretty strong indicator that she's going to be much more activist in terms of her foreign policy.
You mentioned earlier what companies might be thinking, but I want to go a little bit deeper into that. So what are companies kind of having to plan or thinking about planning in light of this election and everything you've just talked about right now?
So there is tremendous opportunity in Mexico for a whole bunch of reasons, right? The big headline ones are it has a trade agreement with and enormous land connectivity with the world's largest market in the United States, right? And you've seen an expansion of this over the last 20, 25 years. So if you're going to be in Mexico, you get automatic access in many ways to that, which for global companies, it was incredibly intoxicating. The challenge is, getting back to one of the questions you asked before, if those companies are going to continue to go to Mexico to be enticed by that value proposition, there has to be more law enforcement, which means at some point the new president is going to have to make some very difficult decisions about what her law enforcement policy is. And businesses, global businesses, are going to have to live with the results of those policies because, depending on how the conditions, Mexico could become an even riskier place to do business, depending upon the reaction of some of those parties.
Okay. And I want to close out with one final question, and that's about another big election that's just happened in India over the past 6 weeks, and we're expecting results on Tuesday. What do you know?
So look, Modi actually had a lot in similarity with AMLO, right? The previous Mexican leader, or the current Mexican leader, because they're both enormously popular. Like, Modi polls in the upper 60s, low 70s, which is almost unheard of anymore, right? Any place in the Western world. He's almost guaranteed to win. I could see very few scenarios where he won't. I think we'll know late tonight, early tomorrow. I think the thing for businesses to remember about the third term that he will be entering is Modi's first term was really about him establishing himself in India, getting his team set up. The second term, which we've talked about, was really about Modi establishing and changing and heightening India's global brand as an alternative to China, as a new market. Now in the third term, I think this is going to be the tough term, right? This is where Modi's going to have to cash the checks that he wrote in the second term. And what that literally means is he's going to have to find trillions of dollars of investment over the next term, right? To improve infrastructure, education, skills, and generate tens of millions of new jobs. If he can do that, I think India can be enormously successful.
Right.
If he can't, I think those are the things that are going to be the evaluation factors of his next term, theoretically.
Right. Craig, thank you so much as always. I really appreciate this.
Thank you for having me back.
We will continue this conversation. In addition to elections in Mexico and India, there are a number of other significant elections happening around the world, and they'll be covered on the next Election Watch. So stay tuned for that. And thank you so much for spending this time with us. Take care.